What happens when a world-famous chef walks onto a morning talk show and ends up storming off set in front of millions of viewers? It only took 33 seconds and one outrageous comment for Gordon Ramsay to go from guest to gone, leaving Alison Hammond standing there in complete shock. This is the story of one of the most explosive interviews in morning television history. The morning started like any other episode of This Morning. Alison Hammond sat in her chair, bright and welcoming as always, ready to chat with one of the biggest names in the culinary world. Gordon Ramsay was scheduled to talk about his new restaurant opening in London, and the producers were excited. After all, Gordon was great television. Fiery, passionate, always good for a soundbite. But nobody could have predicted just how fiery things were about to get. Gordon walked onto the set with that signature confidence. He shook Alison's hand, sat down, and the cameras started rolling. Alison kicked things off with her usual warmth. "Gordon, welcome back. It's so lovely to have you here. Now, we're all dying to hear about this new restaurant. Tell us everything." Gordon smiled, but there was something different about it. Something tight. Something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, well, it's going to be incredible. Best produce, best team, best location, everything you'd expect from a Ramsay restaurant." Alison nodded enthusiastically. "That's amazing, and I have to say the menu we saw online looks absolutely gorgeous. But I noticed something interesting. There's no vegetarian main course. Was that intentional?" It was an innocent question. A fair question, even. But the way Gordon's face changed, you'd think she'd just insulted his entire career. Intentional? Of course it's intentional. I'm opening a steakhouse, Alison. A steakhouse. People come for meat. If they want vegetables, they can go somewhere else. Alison kept her smile, professional as always. "I totally get that. But don't you think in this day and age, having at least one proper vegetarian option might appeal to a wider audience? Lots of people are cutting down on meat these days." Gordon leaned back in his chair, and now the smile was completely gone. "You know what, Alison? I've been doing this for 30 years. 30 years. I think I know a bit more about running restaurants than a morning show host." The atmosphere in the studio shifted. You could feel it. The crew behind the cameras exchanged glances. Alison's producer looked up from her notes. This wasn't going the way anyone had planned, but Alison didn't flinch. She kept that warm smile on her face, kept her voice steady and kind. "Oh, I'm not questioning your expertise at all, Gordon. I'm just asking a question that I think our viewers might be curious about. That's my job." Gordon waved his hand dismissively. Your job is to sit there and ask softball questions, not to tell me how to run my business." Now, the tension was impossible to ignore. Alison took a breath, and you could see her making a choice. She could let it go, move on to the next question, keep things pleasant. Or she could stand her ground. She chose to stand her ground. "With respect, Gordon, I wasn't telling you how to run your business. I asked one question about the menu. That's literally what we do in interviews. We ask questions." Gordon's jaw tightened. "Yeah, well, maybe you should stick to asking questions you actually understand. Have you ever worked in a kitchen? Have you ever had to manage a team of 50 chefs? Have you ever had to maintain Michelin standards?" Alison shook her head gently. "No, I haven't. But I don't need to be a chef to ask if there's a vegetarian option on a menu, Gordon. That's a pretty basic question." "Basic," Gordon repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "That's exactly the word. Basic. Just like this interview." The crew was frozen now. Nobody knew what to do. This wasn't the usual Gordon Ramsay television persona. This was something else. This was real anger, real disrespect, happening live on air. Alison kept her composure. When that's what made her so good at her job. No matter what was thrown at her, she stayed calm, stayed kind. "Gordon, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we talk about the location of the restaurant? I heard it's in a beautiful part of the city. It was a perfect out. A chance to reset, to move past the awkwardness and get the interview back on track. Any reasonable person would have taken it. Gordon didn't take it. You know what? I don't think I need to sit here and be interrogated by someone who clearly has no idea what they're talking about. This is a waste of my time. Alison's eyes widened slightly, but her voice stayed steady. Gordon, I'm not interrogating you. We're just having a conversation. A conversation? Gordon let out a harsh laugh. This isn't a conversation. This is you trying to make me look bad because you think you're clever. Well, I've got news for you. You're not that clever. And this show, it's not that important. The entire studio went silent. Even the cameramen stopped moving. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. Gordon Ramsay, a guest on the show, was openly insulting the program, the host, everything. Alison took a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Gordon, I've been nothing but respectful to you since you sat down. I've asked you fair questions about your restaurant, which is why you're here. If you're not comfortable answering those questions, that's fine. But there's no need to be rude. Rude? Gordon's voice got louder. You want to talk about rude? How about ambushing me with questions about vegetarian menus when I'm here to promote a steakhouse? How about not doing your homework before I came on? That's rude. I did do my homework, Alison replied, still maintaining her composure. I read your menu. That's why I asked the question. Because I read it and noticed there wasn't a vegetarian main. It's not an ambush, Gordon. It's an observation. Gordon stood up abruptly. The microphone attached to his jacket pulled tight, and for a second, it looked like he might rip it off. You know what? I'm done. I'm not sitting here listening to this nonsense. Alison stood up too, instinctively. Gordon, please. Let's just take a breath and... No, Gordon cut her off. I'm not taking a breath. I'm leaving. This is beneath me. And then came the moment that would be replayed thousands of times. The moment that would trend on social media for days. The moment that nobody in that studio would ever forget. Gordon looked directly at Alison and said, maybe if you spent less time worrying about vegetarian options and more time learning how to conduct a proper interview, you'd actually be worth talking to. The gasp that went through the studio was audible. Crew members put their hands over their mouths. The floor manager looked at the director in the control room, waiting for instructions. This had crossed a line. Alison stood there, processing what had just been said to her on live television. Her face showed a flash of hurt, just for a second, before she composed herself. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, but firm. That was completely uncalled for. I've been professional with you this entire time, and you've responded with nothing but hostility. I think it's best if you do leave. Gordon started pulling off his microphone, yanking at the wire. Oh, I'm leaving all right. This show is a joke anyway. I don't know why I agreed to come on in the first place. Then why did you? Alison asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice now. Why come on a show you apparently have no respect for? Gordon paused, the microphone dangling from his hand. Because my publicist said it would be good for publicity. But clearly, she was wrong. Well, you've certainly got publicity now, Alison said. Just maybe not the kind you wanted. That was the last straw. Gordon threw the microphone down onto the chair and started walking off set. But before he got to the edge of the cameras, he turned back. You know what your problem is, Alison? You think you're so charming, so likable, that you can ask whatever you want, and people will just smile and answer. Well, not everyone's impressed by your little act. The floor manager stepped forward. He'd been watching from the sidelines, waiting to see if things would resolve themselves. But this had gone too far. Mr. Ramsay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the building. Gordon turned to him, incredulous. Excuse me? You heard me. You've been disrespectful to our host and our show. We need you to leave. Gordon looked around the studio, as if he couldn't believe this was happening. You're kicking me out? Yes, the floor manager said simply. We are. For a moment, Gordon just stood there. The reality of the situation seemed to be sinking in. He'd come on a popular morning show to promote his restaurant, and instead, he was being escorted out for being rude to the host. The irony was not lost on anyone. Fine, Gordon said, his voice tight. I'm going. But let me tell you something. This show needs me a lot more than I need this show. Alison, still standing by her chair, finally spoke up. Actually, Gordon, we don't need you. We're a successful show, with or without you. But you came here because you needed us to help promote your restaurant. And instead of being gracious about that, you've been nothing but rude and dismissive. So yes, please leave. The words hung in the air. Gordon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like he wanted to say something, to have the last word, but nothing came out. Finally, he just shook his head and walked toward the exit. But he wasn't done yet. As he reached the door, he turned back one more time. You'll regret this. Trust me. You'll regret losing the opportunity to have me on your show. Alison didn't miss a beat. The only thing I regret is that we gave you our platform, and you used it to be disrespectful. Have a good day, Gordon. And with that, Gordon Ramsay walked out. The door closed behind him, and for a moment, the studio was completely silent. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. They'd just witnessed one of the most uncomfortable moments in live television history. Alison took a deep breath and turned to the camera. The red light was still on. They were still live. Millions of people were still watching. Well, she said, and there was a slight tremor in her voice, but she was smiling. That was unexpected. I think we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we've got a lovely segment about spring gardening. I promise it'll be a bit calmer than what you just witnessed. The cameras cut, and immediately the studio erupted. Everyone was talking at once. Some people were comforting Alison, asking if she was okay. Others were already on their phones, knowing this was going to be huge news. The producer was on the line with the network executives, explaining what had just happened. Alison sat back down in her chair and let out a long breath. Her coworkers gathered around her. Are you all right? The floor manager asked. Alison nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. I just can't believe that actually happened. You handled it perfectly, one of the producers said. You stayed professional the whole time, even when he was being awful. I tried, Alison said. I really tried to give him a way out. To move past it. But he just kept pushing. He did more than push, another crew member said. He was completely out of line. You asked one simple question, and he acted like you'd attacked him personally. Alison shook her head. I don't understand it. I've interviewed him before. It was never like this. He was always a bit intense, but never hostile. Maybe he was having a bad day, someone suggested. A bad day doesn't give you the right to treat people like that, Alison replied. Especially not on live television. Especially not when they're trying to help you. Outside the studio, Gordon was being escorted to his car by security. His publicist was on the phone, already doing damage control. She'd watched the whole thing from the green room and knew this was going to be a disaster. Back inside, the show was about to come back from the break. Alison had touched up her makeup, taken a few sips of water, and put her professional face back on. The gardening expert was ready, oblivious to what had just happened. 30 seconds, the floor manager called out. Alison straightened in her chair, checked her notes, and when the camera light came back on, she was all smiles again. Professional. Warm. Completely composed. You'd never know that just minutes earlier, she'd been verbally attacked by one of the world's most famous chefs. But everyone watching at home knew. They'd seen it all, and the clips were already spreading across the internet like wildfire. The hashtags were already trending. People were already taking sides, though the vast majority seemed to be on Alison's side. Because here's the thing about what happened that morning. Alison had asked a simple, reasonable question. One question. about vegetarian options on a menu. That's it. She hadn't been aggressive. She hadn't been rude. She'd been doing her job. And Gordon's response? It was completely disproportionate. He'd taken offense where none was meant. He'd escalated when he could have simply answered and moved on. He'd made it personal when it was just a professional interview. The question that kept coming up afterward was, why? Why did Gordon react that way? Was it really about the vegetarian question, or was something else going on? Was he stressed about the restaurant opening? Was he tired? Was he dealing with something personal? Nobody knew for sure. But whatever the reason, it didn't excuse the behavior. It didn't justify the way he'd spoken to Alison, the way he'd insulted her intelligence, her professionalism, her show. And the worst part? The comment that sealed his fate, that guaranteed he'd be asked to leave, that would be quoted and requoted for weeks to come. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about vegetarian options and more time learning how to conduct a proper interview, you'd actually be worth talking to. Those words, that sentence, it summed up everything that was wrong with Gordon's behavior that morning. The arrogance, the disrespect, the complete lack of self-awareness that he was a guest on someone else's show, that Alison was doing him a favor by giving him airtime, that she had every right to ask him questions. As the day went on, the story grew bigger and bigger. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with reactions. People who'd never even watched This Morning were suddenly watching the clip, sharing it, commenting on it. And through it all, Alison remained dignified. She didn't badmouth Gordon on social media. She didn't give interviews trashing him. She simply continued doing her job, hosting her show, being the warm, professional presence that viewers had come to love. Because that's who Alison Hammond is. Someone who treats people with respect, even when they don't deserve it. Someone who stays professional, even in the most uncomfortable situations. Someone who asks fair questions and expects fair answers. The interview that was supposed to last 15 minutes ended up lasting just over 5. 5 minutes that changed everything. The 5 minutes that showed the difference between someone who uses their power to build others up and someone who uses it to tear them down. Looking back at the transcript, at the exact words that were said, it's hard to find a single moment where Alison was in the wrong. She started with a friendly welcome. She asked about the restaurant. She followed up with a question about the menu. She tried to redirect when things got tense. She stayed calm when Gordon got angry. She stood up for herself when he crossed the line. Every single thing she did was right. Every single thing Gordon did was wrong. And when the floor manager stepped in and asked Gordon to leave, that was the right call too. Because there's a standard of behavior expected from guests on television, and Gordon had fallen far below it. The moment captured something that people had been feeling for a long time. The frustration with entitled celebrities who think they're above basic courtesy. The exhaustion with people who can't handle simple questions without getting defensive. The appreciation for hosts like Alison who maintain their grace under pressure. 33 seconds. That's how long it took from Alison's first question about vegetarian options to Gordon's first dismissive response. 33 seconds to set in motion a chain of events that would end with a world-famous chef being escorted out of a television studio. If Gordon had just taken a breath in those 33 seconds, if he'd just answered the question like a normal person and moved on, if he'd remembered that he was there to promote his restaurant, not to get into an argument with the host, if he'd shown even a fraction of the respect that Alison showed him, but he didn't. And so, instead of a nice, friendly interview that would have given his new restaurant some positive publicity, Gordon Ramsay became the man who got kicked off This Morning for being rude to Alison Hammond. That's his legacy from that day. Not the restaurant, not the food, not the years of success and Michelin stars. Just 5 minutes of bad behavior that overshadowed everything else. The cameras captured every second of it, Every eye roll from Gordon, every patient smile from Alison, every escalation, every attempt to de-escalate, every insult, every graceful response. It was all there, preserved forever, for anyone to watch and judge for themselves. And the judgment was pretty universal. Gordon Ramsay had been completely out of line. Alison Hammond had been a consummate professional, and the floor manager had been right to ask him to leave. This wasn't a case of two people having a disagreement where both sides had valid points. This was a case of one person asking a reasonable question and another person completely overreacting, and then doubling down, and then tripling down until there was no choice but to remove them from the building. The whole thing was a masterclass in how not to conduct yourself as a guest on a television show. Don't get defensive over simple questions. Don't insult the host. Don't act like you're doing them a favor by being there. Don't forget that you're on their platform, not the other way around. And for hosts, it was a masterclass in grace under pressure. Stay calm. Stay professional. Give people opportunities to reset. But also know when to stand up for yourself. Know when enough is enough. Know that you don't have to tolerate disrespect just because someone is famous. That morning on This Morning wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was supposed to be a simple promotional interview. Chef comes on, talks about restaurant, everyone smiles, end of segment. Instead, it became one of those moments that people would remember for years. One of those moments that gets brought up whenever someone talks about difficult celebrity interviews. One of those moments that defines how we think about entitlement and professionalism and basic human decency. All because of one question about vegetarian options. All because Gordon couldn't handle that question without getting defensive. All because he valued his ego more than he valued being kind. 33 seconds to disaster. 5 minutes to a complete meltdown, and a lifetime of people remembering Gordon Ramsay as the guy who got kicked off this morning for being rude to one of the nicest people on television. What made it even more shocking was how unnecessary all of it was. The question wasn't a gotcha. It wasn't a trap. It was the kind of question any interviewer might ask when looking at a restaurant menu. Do you have options for different dietary preferences? It's basic. It's normal. It's expected. But Gordon treated it like Alison had personally insulted his cooking ability. He treated it like she'd questioned his entire career. He treated a simple menu question like it was an attack on everything he'd built. And when she tried to explain that she was just doing her job, just asking questions that viewers might be curious about, he doubled down. He made it about her competence, about her intelligence, about whether she deserved to be sitting in that chair asking him anything at all. The contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Alison remaining calm and professional, even as Gordon got more aggressive. Gordon getting angrier with every exchange. Alison trying to de-escalate. Gordon refusing every opportunity to reset. It was like watching someone dig themselves deeper into a hole, refusing every hand that reached down to help. Every time Alison offered a path forward, Gordon chose confrontation. Every time she gave him grace, he threw it back in her face. The interview started at exactly 9:42 in the morning. By 9:47, Gordon was walking off set. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes from friendly greeting to bitter exit. 5 minutes that would generate weeks of conversation, countless articles, millions of social media posts. 5 minutes where a celebrity chef forgot that fame doesn't excuse rudeness. 5 minutes where a television host showed exactly why she's so beloved by audiences. 5 minutes that proved professionalism and kindness will always win over arrogance and entitlement. That's the story of how Gordon Ramsay got kicked off this morning. Not because Alison Hammond did anything wrong. Not because the show had it out for him, but because he chose, again and again, to be disrespectful, to be hostile, to be inappropriate. And when you make those choices on live television, in front of millions of people, there are consequences.